Welcome to the Filmographers podcast, the show where we've spent nearly a year studying the work of Steven Soderbergh, one film at a time. But we also review new movies and sometimes interview cool people who make movies or study them like we do.
Yeah, in today's episode, we're talking to Blake Howard, who in 2017 just changed the course of podcasting history when he began One Heat Minute, a podcast that Keir and I love. I think it's great. We both think it's great. But if you don't know One Heat Minute and the production arm that he started, it shows, or at least One Heat Minute, is a minute-by-minute examination of Blake's favorite movie, Michael Mann's Heat.
Since then, with various collaborators, he's created so many more obsessive shows, building a veritable podcasting, I should say a puntastic podcasting empire from his home in Australia. These shows include Miami Nice, Zodiac Chronicle, All the President's Minutes, Pod Thomas Anderson, many more.
And he's great at creating really fun titles as well. Knowing how much that we love Blake and how much we love his shows, we asked him to come on so we could all geek out about Steven Soderbergh, and Blake's favorite Soderbergh film may surprise you. But we also learned about his journey into podcasting, what he likes in a movie, and which future projects he has planned. He was kind enough to join us from the future too. When we spoke, it was 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Welcome, Blake. Glad to have you on the Filmographers podcast. We're really excited to talk to you about Steven Soderbergh today. But before we get into that, could you just, for those who haven't come across your podcasting empire so far yet, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into podcasting and what your podcasting journey has been like?
Well, thank you for having me, guys. And I really appreciate occasionally talking about stuff that's different. Which is nice. No, I say that just facetiously because when I started podcasting, my podcast has been around for nearly the length that my daughter, who is nearly 9 this year, has been alive. She probably 8 years of the podcast, One Heat Minute or One Heat Minute Productions. And well before that, I was like a attempted movie journalist, film critic. I had done sort of like a stewardship or like a apprenticeship, if you like, of being like a Sydney in Australia radio film critic from like a great, like experienced radio DJ film critic named Dale Sinden, who took me under his wing and kind of showed me the ropes. And I did a couple of other podcasts, as it feels like every white guy has to do in their life is to do it. But genuinely,
there are no white guys in podcasting.
I feel
it's
like
about time we got a chance to have our opinions be known, right?
Listen, I finally have a platform to share this. But no, but what had happened was the genesis of my real true love of cinema, and I got a degree in film, media, and cultural studies, and honors in that at university level from a more like academic place. The genesis of my true love of film is just like films that move me and I don't know why. And for the longest time I was wondering, I stopped doing that podcast about the film reviews and I was doing sort of week to week stuff, trying to break into the industry when there was still one. And at the time, I just started pitching some ideas to my friends about like, I've had a kid and I want to do a podcast, and I think that's the only thing I want to do in the area of film criticism. It's the only thing that I want to exercise, but I don't know what to do. And I gave my friends a bunch of ideas, of bad ideas. All of them were universally bad, and they're my trusted friends, so they just were like, no, or no, or no. That sounds dumb. Why would you want to do that? And then one of my dearest friends, Stu Coote, who did lots of the show of One Heat Minute, has done lots of stuff, a real great film mind, but like kind of like a normal person as well. And he just said, what do you want to talk about? Because if you're going to do a podcast, you got to tell people, what do you want to talk about? And he gave me kind of I say it as the Robin Williams speech from Good Will Hunting, where he like grabs Will's shoulders and is like, it's not your fault. And he's like, don't say that to me, Sean. I was like, my reaction was, all I want to do is talk about Heat all fucking day. And he said the best thing that anyone's ever said to me, which is, I'd listen to that. And then so what happened, we orchestrated a show called One Heat Minute, just the pun gasmic title that it is, to explore Michael Mann's 1995 crime opus, which turns 30 this year, Heat, a minute at a time chronologically. The episode started out at about 15 to 20 minutes each, grew into about an hour. There's like 196 episodes just of that show. It went well beyond the 166 pre-credits minutes. And I thought no one was listening until lots of people were listening, and lots of fans of Michael Mann and Heat. And basically, we just threw out into the universe increasingly bigger guest hopes. And then my great friend Bilge Ebiri, who's one of the best film critics in the world, one of the people who actually does the gig at the highest level, interviewed Michael Mann and told him about the show because he'd been on it. And I got a text at 3 a.m. in bed with my wife and toddler at the time, my son. And, 2 years of 2 podcasts a week of One Heat Minute concluded with Michael Mann coming on the show. And since then, in the preceding 6 years, we've done deep dives with Travis Woods, who's one of my dearest friends, great film critic on Inherent.
He's the best.
Yeah, I did Increment Vice with Trav. I did All the President's Minutes, which was 136 episodes in 11 months, which is also really dumb. Every single minute of that show. And we've just increasingly been lucky enough to speak to lots of different people. Guillermo del Toro came on a bonus episode of One Heat Minute. Brian Koppelman, spoke to Jane Alexander for All the President's Minutes. We've done Zodiac Chronicles, spoke to Jake Gyllenhaal for that. It's just been crazy. So we've had a run of shows that are really obsessive cinematic deep dives. And because that's kind of my modus operandi, is like, I almost have to exercise the demon of the film's connection to me by sort of examining the whole house. I need to get in every nook and cranny. I need to understand how it works. And I feel enriched talking to people like yourselves or my guests, because I just try and absorb people's different perspectives of the things that I examine. And then I feel like once it's done, I can go, oh yeah, I get it. But then my body does this strange thing where I go, well, what's next? And it's not very calculated or organic. It's just like, what is now scratching at the door? And so, next films this year, Ronin, John Frankenheimer's Ronin, which we're calling Ronin. Doing a mini series on that, and then the Insider, which we're calling, of course, the Minsider, and that will be 60 episodes. That will take us out. That's our big deep dive for the year. So One Heat Minute Productions is not just me; it's a bunch of other shows. Guide for the Film Fanatics, a new show. Miami Nice with my amazing co-host Katie Walsh is a consistent sort of modern man horny campfire, we call it. And we're up to about 800 or so episodes across a whole bunch of different series. We covered filmmakers like Fincher, soon to be John Frankenheimer, but Paul Thomas Anderson, Jim Henson. I've worked with a bunch of great creatives, either producing shows or hosting them. And that's kind of my journey. So that's a little summary. But I do love Steven Soderbergh because he is the world's biggest fan, or maybe second, of All the President's Men.
That's true. Yeah, we know what are his top movies? So like the 5,000 Fingers of Mr. T, Dr. T. Did I say Mr. T? That's a different movie.
I think Mr. T rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
That's the remake. All the President's Men, Stalag, 17. Yeah. But it's funny that you mentioned this, and we're going to get to this in a second, because it's interesting to hear you say about you have to get in and examine how the house is made and know all the details and stuff, because, and I mean, we're going to get to this question, but I just listened to your podcast, and apologies, I forget who you were in discussion with on Presence, and you talk about Soderbergh's obsessions with how things work and how they function, how they operate. And your description of what draw you to podcasting is a very Soderberghian impulse, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm an obsessive, weird guy. I like to know how things work, but also not for the reasons of technical. Soderbergh is like a technical master. That's what's so amazing about him. He can tell you how things work from such a technician's lens, but there's also these flurries of emotion. And so for me, it's a combination of both. I need to know how the technical works, but then there's something about like when you surrender to the technical and something just like transcendent happens in an actor's face, in a performance, in a still, in a how a frame holds, in a song choice, in a music cue. And they're the kind of inexplicable things that are so beautiful and transcendent. But he's a master at that. He makes movies just because he wants to learn if he can make them. That's so cool. Like it's just the coolest, it's the coolest level to be at, to be like, I want to do this because I just don't know if I can do it. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, what was it, Keir? We were talking to Chris Sullivan. So, Blake, you're actually only our second interview. We've done very few interviews over whatever it is, like 50 episodes now. But our first was with Chris Sullivan, who obviously was in the Nick and the Presence, and he had said to the cast,
all killer, no filler. Chris Sullivan, he is awesome. He is in the Presence. He is outstanding. Going to be one of those guys in like 10 years that everyone's like, he's the best. And you're like, yeah, no shit, he's the best. We're all telling you he was the best.
Yeah, he's the best part of the Nick too, I'll be honest, at least in my opinion.
Nick rules. Yeah, totally.
But he's saying, he's like, Soderbergh came up to us and he's like, the first day of filming, he's like, I don't know if this is going to work. I hope it does, because if it sucks, there's no plan B. And that was it. So, I mean, I'm sure he had some confidence that it was going to roll, this very specific way that he was making the movie, but also like, a little doubt at just like the audacity and the courage, like we said, like, I'm just doing it to see if I can. And I scraped together $2 million for this experiment, and now we're going to do it. We're just going to see what happens. And it's one, terrifying in a sense, but also so inspiring and so cool that he's like, I just want to see if I can.
Well, and what a tone that must set with your cast to begin a production like that, instead of, coming in like the all-knowing auteur, my motives are mystical, you shall be the pawns I place on the board. He obviously invites a sense of collaboration and freshness and trying to capture the thing instead of, killing it and dissecting it. He's trying to capture it in life.
I think you kind of earned that. I think maybe you have to start with as the all-knowing guy. And what I get a sense out of Soderbergh is that he's come to the point where they are so confident in him, like his track records, like it's really hard once I imagine starting like that. Like I have no idea if this is going to work like that, like Ramel Ross, for example, who just made Nickel Boys. Terrific film. If you haven't seen it, or if your listeners haven't seen it, seek it out. It's about to come on I'm sure it's on in the States. It's on video on demand, or will be on some kind of streaming service soon that you can.
I think it just came on yesterday. Well, so a week from the past, whenever this post. But yeah, very recently.
Very recently, around sometime in the world, it will be on. But I think that's so hard. It's like great script, bunch of great actors, very immersive style, and just being like, I don't know, like we're gonna do this. Like I don't know if it's gonna work. But when you've got like, I mean, the film that we're going to talk about today, but when you've just got Soderbergh's resume, people are like, I'm there because of you, bro. Like I'm here because of you. And I think that I can personally say, like in a way smaller scale, like some of the shows I've done, I had absolutely no clue if they're going to work. Like they're more aspirationally different, weird audio kind of experiments. And I have no idea if they're going to work until I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, I found it. Like I found the format that it needs to work in. So it's sometimes that's just the way, like even all the way up to like Podcaster and Commander, which is about Master and Commander, a show that I did about Peter Weir, is like, I did the first episode and then I had like writer's block or podcaster's block and I hated it. And I went back and recut the whole episode and I re-released it. And I said, okay, now that's the start again. We started again. I found what the show is. Only after recording and listening to it that I found what the show was. But you had those experiments. And I imagine with him, he's just like that. He can do something and then go, okay, yeah, that didn't work. I'll move on to the next thing. But he's pretty inspiring person just in general as a filmmaker.
Oh yeah, and the fact that he's still doing it. This is something I think, Keir, you pointed out when we saw it together. And we left the theater and we're like, man, the fact that he's still doing this at however many 30 plus movies in, that he's still like, I'm just going to take the wild swing and I'm just going to go for it at this stage of his career, and how much experience, because he doesn't need to be doing these experiments. He can be doing Ocean's 14. He can be doing whatever. And it'd probably be a lot easier and a lot more comfortable and less rushed and more money and all these kind of things. It would make his job simpler, I guess you can say. Probably potentially less creatively fulfilling, but simpler. And he's not doing that. He's not. He's just saying, this is what I want to do. I don't care how many movies I've done. You're totally right. I mean, he's built trust, thank goodness, to do this. But like the fact that he would just even be like, nope, this is what I'm doing next. So let's go is amazing.
Let's jump right into it and talk about the film that we brought you here to talk about. I mean, I think your admiration for Soderbergh and your interest in him seems clear. You picked Erin Brockovich as the film to talk about. We would have let you talk about anything, including Schizopolis. What, out of all of Soderbergh's films, what drew you to Erin Brockovich?
This is a strange coherence of events in that it's the year 2000. My older cousin, who I think is 9 years older than me. So like by the time, when you're a young kid, I would have been 15 at the time that this movie came out. I've got a cousin who's 9 years older and is like, let's go to the movies. So like movies that we had seen in the past together, Bad Boys twice in one day, for example. And I was probably way too young for that, but he bought the tickets and we went in together. So there was no I think it was like you had to go in with parental supervision, or maybe it was one of those ones that wasn't. I can't remember the rating. But anyway, this is the kind of guy, like he's my cousin. We liked action movies. We used to watch Bruce Lee movies on, VHS tapes on tiny box televisions at my grandmother's house and or my nana. We say nana because I'm part Maltese. And so my cousin took me to the movies quite a bit. Like we just hang out because he lived near my grandmother. And we went and saw Erin Brockovich together at the movies. And he's like a sporty, tough, not very intellectual guy. And we saw the movie and we were so blown away that we saw it the next night. And I reckon it was just a really funny one because it was so funny that he was so into the movie. Like he was into this investigative journalist kind of like adjacent thing, this real life story, and was just so riveted by it. And literally from that time, I remember those two screenings so super vividly. From that time, I've always held it. Like I know that it's Julia Roberts and I know that it was critically lauded. And I know that in that year, he also made Traffic, Soderbergh himself. So there was also this kind of like crazy thing of like, rarefied air of directors who make, Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year, or The Godfather Part 2 in The Conversation, or like Traffic and Erin Brockovich. Like they become these huge critical moments that get a lot of noise, like that people in the community know them. And even in Australia, Erin Brockovich was a huge movie, Julia Roberts, huge movie star. But years went on, and the thing that is so infuriating with every new Soderbergh movie is everyone wanting to re-rank Soderbergh movies. It happens with Michael Mann. It happens with everyone. And it makes me so tired. But one of the things I always said is like, if you're not talking about Erin Brockovich, for me personally, in the top films that Soderbergh has made, your list is flawed. Like this movie for me, and becomes surprised to no one as a person who is obsessed with All the President's Men. I'm like, this is his All the President's Men. Like this is as close a movie that he, I guess, was brave enough to make, to look at the rhythms of that movie, to make it happen in the way. Except for a really weird needle drop that I completely forgot about until my most recent rewatch in the credits, which is so weird. But anyway, I don't know why that's there. But
every day is a winding road.
Every day is a winding road. I'm like, what the hell is going on? But I
Everybody
just remember,
stand up and dance.
It is just a flawlessly executed movie. Julia Roberts is riveting. Finney is amazing. It is shot with such a very terrifically sort of calibrated aesthetic. It moves like a locomotive. And from that second, I was like, right then I was taken. I always thought it was a beautiful and wonderful movie. And I really remember that experience fondly because of how I'd absorbed it. But it was just always one that, like, no matter what, it has infinite rewatchability. it's just fun. It's quotable. It's now meme. It's sort of in the last couple of years, it feels like it's meme to death.
Yeah.
That's all you got, lady. I sent you guys an Instagram post of like there's people like using Julia Roberts' voice to talk about silly things. It's just like it's just an amazing movie, top to bottom. And I think it is genuinely like because I have this sort of like mini 1 heat minute productions canon of like the great movies that we've examined and that stand up to the test of the level of scrutiny that we take them through. I would say like this is a movie that could stand up. Like it just has everything that I love about movies, and it just feels so effortless. But there is a tremendous amount of artistry and just honing in on every element of the movie that just works in every way that I could possibly love it. So I love this movie, and I'm so excited. It's like it's also scary. It's like 25 years old this year, but it's which means that we're old. It's just so old.
When you mentioned Heat being 35, I was like, oh god, because I remember seeing that in the movie theater. So
yeah,
boy,
it's all we're getting old. So I just love this movie top to bottom. I think it is absolutely masterful. But that's the great thing about great directors is I think everyone can have their five and the movies that really grow on them. But I don't know, straight out the gate, maybe because this was so popular and so universally embraced, that a lot of people kind of sleep on it. They're like, yeah, that got its due. It's not cool. You got to say the Limey. You got to say the Limey is your favorite, or Out of Sight. You can't say that. And I'm like, man, Erin Brockovich and Logan Lucky, forget it. Like that, they're kind of more my speed. Of course, Oceans, of course, Traffic, of course, but Erin Brockovich feels like way more my kind of movie. I'm always excited to talk about it.
I think you really hit on something when you talk about why it's definitely not anybody's. It's not the hipster's choice when you're ranking Soderbergh.
No.
Mike and I, halfway through our season, kind of ranked our probably annoyingly to you if you were paying attention. we ranked our the first half of Soderbergh's filmography, and we never tell each other what our rankings are before we get there, and we disagree a little bit on where Out of Sight and The Limey go. But we were both surprised to find Erin Brockovich really near the top for both of us. And I do think that it's almost entirely the Julia Roberts factor, because I think people look back and they just think, oh, you've got this major movie star. It's kind of like, she's the female Clooney. So Ocean's 11 maybe doesn't get the kind of, everybody likes it, but people aren't going to pick it as their favorite Soderbergh necessarily, because it just doesn't seem like it has that little frisson, that little edge, that little hipness or whatever. But I agree with you completely that no matter how many times I rewatch Brockovich, I just think this movie works on every level. There's something I discover about it every time. Little things like, I don't know how many viewings I was in when I realized that the scene where Finney calls a couple of staffers in to pose as lawyers so they can make up the numbers on their side of the table, that the guy he calls in is wearing one of his shirts because he's got the same little design on the collar. Like, there's so many little touches like that, little grace notes that do make it worth that kind of careful scrutiny. And yet it's also a successful Hollywood film that is carried by this bravura performance by a megawatt, movie star. But yeah, I think Mike and I both agree completely. It's top ranked Soderbergh.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it's crazy too because I hadn't seen, when we went on this journey through all of Soderbergh's movies, there's some that I hadn't seen in a while, and Traffic and Brockovich were two that I hadn't seen in a while, and I never loved Traffic. Like, it was a movie I was like, okay, it's fine, and as we all know, it ended up winning, Best Director. Soderbergh beat himself legendarily, but like, what's crazy though is like I went back and watched it, and I was like, man, it's not even close. Like, Brockovich is so much better, so much more satisfying. Like you said, Blake, it moves like nothing else. Like, it's just a breeze. It's fun. It's smart. It's a remarkable. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite things I think from the season of rewatching all these movies is if there's a few that I've recognized that I didn't realize I love as much as I do. Erin Brockovich being one of them, and Good German being one that I realized I didn't how do I say this? That I loved, that I didn't know that I loved and came to love
Yes.
through watching it a few times. But there's actually a question that I had that goes back to your process question that we were talking about from your presence episode. And what's interesting though is that like Soderbergh is a guy that loves process, like we said. And it's funny that he loves President's Men because it's all process, just all of them figuring things out, And one of the things that Keir and I talk about in the Erin Brockovich episode that we were fascinated by is that like Erin Brockovich on paper is a courtroom drama that has no courtroom scenes, except for when Erin is on trial, not on trial, but like trying to get her insurance claim or whatever it is. There, you take that away. There's literally no courtroom scenes in this courtroom movie. It's all about it's almost like how a courtroom drama works, what the investigative work is. And I'm just wondering, is that one of the things, knowing how much you love All the President's Men, which I think is a brilliant comparison. Is that one of the things that attracts you to Erin Brockovich?
Oh, for sure. It's termite art, as Manny Farber used to say. It's the kind of it's like process porn. It's someone who is it's someone who. What's great about Erin is she's just a working class person, but that doesn't mean she's not intelligent. And I think there's this delineation that they exploit in the movie and the storytelling of people always sort of counting her out. So it's like a massive underdog story led by a massive underdog. And in a lot of these situations, you see that they just get eaten. But the satisfaction of the movie is that obviously they triumph, which is, hashtag spoilers to real life and a film. But the cool thing that it does is it just shows her digging through and taking the time and being granted permission the time to like rigorously research something to the nth degree. And then it shows that tactile thing of like, this is not just a statistic. We're not just looking at things. It's that real, true boots on the ground journalism, like I guess what we'd call now, like sort of like the golden age of, that rarefied air, that sort of fantastical, it feels like in the modern era of like going and talking to people and realizing that there are human stories behind, corporate malfeasance. It's
Right.
like there are people that live and die based on these decisions for greed. And I think that that's what the movie is so powerful at. Is this absolutely insane lineup and cachet of like great character actors that perform as people who are just suffering. And Erin is this person who, despite all the legalese and despite all this sort of corporate cover-ups and all these things that are happening, she's the kind of like the down-to-earth translator who's like, no, this is what it is because we're trying to get you the most money. And this is why lawyers are really expensive, because we wear all the costs. Everyone is being paid out of pocket. And if we lose, they get nothing. We both collectively get nothing. And this is asking the questions and digging in and sort of also awakening each new person that she speaks to, the dangers that they've been put in by this company. So it's just one of these brilliant things where you've got like the perfect tool, the perfect audience avatar that's living this experience, because it is, digging into this sort of chemical thing. And, it's dense. And so, but it doesn't treat you stupid because she's not stupid. It just sort of unfolds the story in a way that she's consuming it at a level. That's what I think is also great here about like the expository dumps are done in such an artful way that they don't feel like they're laborious. But yeah, I don't look at it as a courtroom drama, as fun as it is for her to just take the piss out of every lawyer that she comes in count with, like including Albert Finney like 1,000 times, who's just so great as
and that
Ed.
buttoned up lawyer with Peter Coyote's firm who takes over at the end, like that woman's almost a caricature of the prim, hair in a bun kind of thing, and we're going to take her down. But by that point, we're just cheering for Erin so much that, of course, that's a real crowd pleasing moment. I think you really nailed it, Blake, when you said that, just the elegance of the way they share the expository information is really a strength that comes from the script, but also the editing and the way the whole thing comes together. Because certainly, if you talk about a case that has that many plaintiffs and something, it shouldn't be esoteric, but still, like the idea of like groundwater poisoning through this, hexavalent chromium, something that most people have never even heard of in their lives. I mean, in a lot of people's hands, that is not a Hollywood blockbuster.
No.
And it comes down to how simply they share all that information.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes. Like one of my favorite, very underrated scenes in All the President's Men is Dustin Hoffman's Bernstein flirting on a rooftop cafe with a kind of what would we say? They're like kind of like like one of the like kind of political underlings, like someone who works in the office of a big politician. And
Right.
he's sort of digging in. And he's like, and she's like, "Oh, you're you know, I've heard about you." And he's just flirting. And I'm like, yeah, he's just trying to get information. And Erin knows her strength. She's a beautiful, striking woman. And she's like, yeah, like if a lawyer says, I've got a warrant or I want to walk into this place, it's really hard for them. But people immediately count me out. So I can go in there and I can be invisible, or I can be like, oh, let her take a look. She's got, you know, she's got great boobs. I'm going to just sit here and look at this really attractive woman and let her like flirt with me and get what she wants, because who cares? And it just makes her this perennial kind of like invisible person to so many people. And it's only as the movie grows, it's like, oh no, this is my worst nightmare if I let if I let this woman in here, because she's going to get this information out of me that other people can't, because that's how she's had to live. She's a survivor. So I just love those little scenes of like interpersonal relationships. Sometimes give you these little glean these little bits of information, and you know, like just other times in Presidents, it's like, you know, oh, we broke up. You know, they say to their associate in Presidents K, they're like, oh, you broke up. Well, you look better. And you know, just those little flirting things are just, that's how you get that's how you build trust with people. You build rapport, and then people start to talk. And so that's why I see this movie as that. And just the pacing, the deployment of score. Sometimes it's really lean and mean. It has no score, and then there's others just little beats progressing through. It's just such an instinctual and very tactical movie that like doesn't feel like it's in a rush, but it's streaming. And it's also like it decides the greatest decision, which is like, do I need to see this court case? No, that's not the point. I don't want to see this. I don't need to see the big moment of, you
Mhm.
know, the JFK, like what is it, the A
The
Time to
Zapruder film.
Kill. Yeah, I don't need to see the big like court case where the white guy stands up front and wins. I'm like, okay, I'm good. We're done. And Peter Coyote, for anyone who hasn't seen his resume, is such a dirty little freak that like when I saw him as this, I was just like, oh, man, how did they get? I mean, that's such a Soderbergh thing to get like the button-up guy as Peter Coyote, but he's such a freak. Like, go check out his entire filmography.
Oh,
Very,
weirdo.
he's
Yeah.
a weirdo of the top tier. So, um, but yeah, so like just interesting how how all those choices play out throughout the movie. But yeah,
That's one
it's
of Soderbergh's superpowers, I think, is that sense that, you know, if there's a scene he has to shoot that he feels like is a stock scene in any film, and he can't think of a new way to do it, he won't do it.
yeah,
You know, like in the Nick, when we're talking to Sullivan, like he's talking about the confessional scene, and he's like, oh my God, you know, everybody shoots through the little grate, or sometimes they shoot from above. How the hell am I going to do it? And then he's like, oh, I don't think I've seen one where you just see the guy's legs sticking out from behind the curtain. Let's do that. And
yes,
that ended up, there's a little more of a story to that, but still, I think that captures Soderbergh. He just does not want to repeat himself. And there's a lot of directors who, maybe under the guise of homage or whatever, are comfortable kind of repeating things they have seen.
yeah, he's funny like that. I remember I heard him say this brilliant thing, which is like, if I can't think of a reason why you're not in a two shot, like if I can't think of a purpose that is going to drive the story forward to not shoot two characters in conversation in a two shot. And for your audience listening, if you're not sure what a two shot means, it literally is two cameras, one on each character. You know, much like, you know, Heat, the great diner scene. That is a two shot. It was actually a three shot. There was both of them in frame at the same time, but the two shot is where the power is, because you're watching on the edge of on the edge of your frame, your the aspect ratio capturing the entire sort of cinematic frame. At the edge of your frame, you're seeing the other people's sides of their faces or slight shoulder movements or something like that as they're reacting, the bounce off of one another. And Soderbergh gets it, like that's just part of cinematic grammar. And if I can't figure out a better way or a smarter way or a way that's going to tell the story, bring the story forward, I'm not going to do it. And the Nick is the perfect example, because it's like, what is one thing about a confessional is like that privacy and shame. And when you shoot from someone's feet, it's like, I'm so shameful in this confession that I don't even want to show you the character's face, because that's how they're feeling. That is like, for me, that's where that's his brain going like, there is a better way to show this, because it's actually going to tell us more about this character, what he's saying, and emphasize the words that are coming out because he doesn't want his feet to be exposed. The only thing that's exposed is his feet. So that's what I'm going to shoot. So for me, that's just genius, right? Like that's so profound and great, but it's just also really well thought out for the story.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. Like, there's always seems to be, he's so, and I know there's like some people like he has a certain clinicalness to things because, again, going back to the Sullivan interview, he did joke. He's like, sometimes people like they would say you got Soderberghed, it's like you were in a scene and you're just not there. You're cut out. And it's like, why? Because he didn't need you. You just weren't needed. Like you're saying, like you just found in the edit, like, we don't need to see this person. So I'm just going to cut it out, like he's so economical and he's so clinical. But like at the same time, like everything that he does, there's so much thoughtfulness to it. And I feel like that's so much, it's funny. We always joke, Keir and I, there's a running joke about, Manohla Dargis from New York Times, who's a brilliant critic, but she's always saying like, Soderbergh, that stuffy academic, it's like, but he is so funny and his movies have so much warmth and heart. Like Erin Brockovich has all those things. And Logan Lucky is so funny, but cares about its characters that I feel like he gets often mislabeled as like being like this kind of academic, clinical, just cold shooting when he's anything but the sort. The more we see of him, the more the more human side that absolutely exists and is in his movies.
I love Manohla Dargis, greatest living film critic in my mind, and also a friend, which is crazy for me to say, but she's just one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. Anyway, but she's also kind of right. It's like if you look at Soderbergh, if that's all you take from, if that's all that's resonating with you, and that's what's great about cinema is that like for you guys and your entire project, it's about what resonates with you. And I think with Manohla, some filmmakers really resonate with her. So that's okay. Like some people are looking at him because Manohla seeing so many damn films. She's looking at such a technical level of prowess. It's like Fincher, right? And they're buddies.
Which is so strange, which is like where he's like the greatest buddy comedy that never was.
Oh my God. I love reading interviews with Soderbergh talking about Fincher because like imagine your mates, like, sometimes we would do it creatively as well. You get your mate to like see a draft of something. Like Soderbergh watches Fincher direct and he's just like, he stresses me out. I can't. He just leaves. Goes back to his office. He's like,
because Fincher's like, the color grading in the corner. I got to redo the whole thing. And
look, that guy's right shoulder needs to be over about 1.5 more inches. And Steven Soderbergh just goes, I'm going. I can't with you. But that's what's so great about them together, right? But but he's a technician, and so with Manohla, knowing how she's writing, there is something about there's an alchemy that she's looking for, which sometimes goes completely antithetical to grammar. Whereas Soderbergh is such an intuitive audience person about grammar that that's how he operates. That's how he thinks about story. He's trying to think about the grammar of what he's telling and how that's going to make that thing work. And so sometimes people just see the grammar. I imagine with Manohla, like, someone who's watched so many movies and has had to write about them and think about them so deeply for so long. She's like, she can almost see his methods in his work, and maybe it's impenetrable, but that's okay. Like we're all enriched by different opinions, especially someone as smart as Manohla. But also, like in a Soderbergh movie, being Soderbergh is so like that's the softest way. Like I think about Terrence Malick, like he made his recent movies like Song to Song, and there's people who like acted for like 3 months and improvised like an entire movie of a character, and then Terrence Malick shows them 3 times in the background of other scenes, and they're not in the movie anymore. So that would suck. Like if you're a person who's like, man, I think I did some of my best work, and then you're silent in the background of a concert scene, like Val Kilmer, who's like in Song to Song, I think it is like twice. You see him like cutting his hair. It's like, what the hell was Val Kilmer even thinking? Like he was there, he's a great improviser, he's funny, he's charming, and he's in that movie for like 4 seconds. And you're like, wow. He's like, I shot that movie for 3 months. Like I was number 3 on the call sheet, and now I'm, like it's ouch, But I think just sometimes that's what people are seeing. They're seeing the technique, and it's not. And Soderbergh has that same thing as Alan Pakula, who's the director of All the President's Men. Always people like going, yeah, he's a really good director, but is it always penetrable? Is it always great? But Pakula used to do that. He would have these amazing lead Hollywood-esque performances that would lead things off. But his filmmaking chops, especially during that period of the 1970s, was some of the best that was produced by American cinema. Like his Paranoia trilogy is like so top tier. But then you watch like Pelican Brief, which I adore as well. And people are like, oh, it's his popcorn bullshit airport novel remake movie. And I'm like, watch that movie again. Like, it's just effortless. It looks so good. It's like all the performances are incredible. Julia is amazing. Denzel is amazing. You know, all these people are so great. It's like, don't discount it just because it's got some gloss. Like underneath the gloss is a real filmmaker. And I think that Soderbergh might suffer some of those in some of his more glossy or technical movies. Because people are looking beyond that. They don't just want the technical, they want the emotional. But, you know, I mean, John Denver's Country Road in Logan Lucky will make me bawl my eyes out. Bawl my eyes out.
Yes, absolutely.
We've raised the names of a handful of different directors in the last few minutes. This is a little bit of an off-the-wall question, but of people working today, so let's rule out Pakula, but like of other directors working contemporaneously with Soderbergh, and maybe of his generation, can you think of another director who could have done Erin Brockovich, done it as well?
Oh God, done it as well. That's a tough question. That's like when filmmakers go, I'm really inspired by Heat. This is my Heat. And I'm like, shut up. Don't say that.
So you're not doing a deep dive into Den of Thieves, are you saying?
I have done. That's how Katie Walsh and I, one of our big friendship forming things was watching the first Den of Thieves together, which she called Dumb Heat. And I can share with your listeners that because I'm doing Ronin as one of our next series, Katie and I are doing a special bonus episode on Dumb Ronin, which is Den of Thieves 2 Pantera. So, God.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. Oh man,
it's Dumb Ronin. It's Dumb Ronin. It is. I'm sorry, Michael. It's Dumb Ronin in a really fun way. Okay, like so some of the easy ones. One person that we talked about was like Fincher made Zodiac. This is a guy who clearly that movie is like that's his All the President's Men.
Definitely,
most definitely. But the quotient that people don't understand or people may not appreciate about Zodiac is like Fincher grew up in San Francisco in the 70s. Remembers his parents having hesitations about putting him on school buses because there were going to be bombs on buses, and has some of this like experiential, tactile, understanding. And his dad worked in a newspaper. So there's something so deeply personal there, and in all the specificity of how he conducts that movie, that is, he's a guy who could make an Erin Brockovich, as far as I'm concerned. And he also made The Social Network, which, again, another real life thing, a masterpiece. The King's Speech. What? Who cares?
Oh boy.
Another bad decision. It's nearly Oscar season, folks. We're going to watch all those bad decisions keep going. But
can't wait for Complete Unknown to sweep.
It's really hard. Yeah, it probably will. Look, I'm hoping for Wicked because I put $100 on $50 on a cheeky bet when the odds were really long, and so there could be a few $1,000s coming into my pocket if Wicked wins. So
if you make hay, if that at least gives us that from the Oscars, I'll be glad.
I'll take that. Oh God, this is a really hard one. I'm trying to think of procedural directors.
Fincher's such an interesting choice in that regard, although I feel like he's just not quite as light on his feet, obviously, or like the humor doesn't, it would be a very different movie, but a very interesting movie.
Oh, super interesting. Way darker.
Yeah.
Way darker. So there is a terrific film which also stands in this group, and it's the only one that's contemporary, but it shows like a completely different kind of lens. Todd Haynes made a film called Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo and Anne Hathaway, Tim Robbins, back in 2019.
Yes. Yep.
That is,
I almost forgot about that.
That is a terrific movie. Yeah, like for your listeners, anyone who's like digging into Soderbergh and wants their like little adjacencies, make yourself some nice double features. That was a movie that like they are kind of contemporaries. I'm trying to think like they were both around the kind of 92 to 94 Sundance.
Oh yeah.
Big
Yeah,
filmmakers of the time. So I'm like, yep. But he kind of made his, and that's Dark Waters is much bleaker and darker, and really gets to really puts a face on greed. And Ruffalo is absolutely tremendous in it. Has some fantastic actors in it. It's a really hard one because it's about delicacy, and it's about humor, and it's about kind of surrendering to Star Wattage. But yeah, I think it's really hard for me. That triangulation, the Todd Haynes, the David Fincher, the Soderbergh. Yeah, I'm sorry,
I
they're
like
kind of
Haynes.
my
That's a pretty great pick. That's a
I
Haynes.
think Haynes is a solid pick. I think that's
Haynes could do it. Haynes has worked with stars and also has a real delicate touch as well. He's someone who's really great.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now I know we are all we promised to get you out at a reasonable time. I think it's like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. for you.
Close,
so
yeah.
I'll give us one more question. I think I'm really interested to hear your response, because during the course of this, Keir and I have both picked our like minor. I hate to use the word minor because I don't know. There's what is a minor movie, but lesser known, let's say, or experimental Soderbergh movie. Our favorites, like Keir, ended up being, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Bubble, right? Would be your favorite off the beaten path Soderbergh.
Yeah, that's one I would definitely recommend to people who only know the handful of Soderbergh hits, and maybe, you know, if I wanted to suggest his range and say, look, this is one that almost nobody has seen and is a lot more than you expect it to be, I would say Bubble.
Yeah, and I went with, I already mentioned, Good German, which is a movie that like was wildly mismarketed as like, it's sort of like a new Casablanca, and that movie is so relentlessly bleak.
Yeah.
And so brilliant and so well shot, and it's probably my favorite Clooney performance. It's just absolutely superb. So what would be your, Blake, what would be your Soderbergh favorite that's not in that, you know, typical top tier?
This is a cusp one. I don't know if I can say The Informant. Was that big?
No, the Informant did not do well.
The Informant is a scream
Oh,
because Matt Damon is not a leading man. This is a hot take. Matt Damon can never be a white hat. He's never going to be Tom Cruise, right? The only way that Matt Damon is Jason Bourne is because he's a psychopath who forgot that he's a psychopath. Matt Damon is always better when he's like broken, psychologically traumatized, selfish, cowardly, and that's when he's actually the best, you know. And Soderbergh has deployed him, you know, Linus, all the way back to Linus, selfish, maybe going to backstab you. Obviously, the movies don't ever go down that path. But if Linus betrayed the entire Oceans team and got them all caught and thrown into prison, it wouldn't shock any of us.
No.
And The Informant, which is made in 2009, is basically about an informant who is working for this like agricultural business giant, and he's the vice president of the company. And to get attention, he starts to inform on the company's malpractice to the US government, and they're like, "This guy's insane," and he is insane. But some of the stuff he's telling them is true, and it is just an absolute scream of a movie. He is such a little freak. It's got great actors in it: Tony Hale, Patton Oswalt, Tom Papa, another comedian, Melanie Linsky, Scott Bakula, Tom Wilson, Biff himself. It's a real fun one. I really want to recommend The Informant because on one of the many times that people re-rank Soderbergh every 6 months, I watched The Informant again and I was like, that is so amazing. It's so funny. But also because of, the NBA season of it all, High Flying Bird is terrific from 2019. I don't know if people miss that. It sort of, as with all kind of Netflix movies, they are on your carousel for like 3 minutes. They don't tell anyone they're coming out. They bury them in an algorithm that stinks. And you're like, I don't want to watch Stranger Things. I would like to watch a Steven Soderbergh film, please. And it kind of, it just disappeared off the face of the earth. But that's a terrific, again, a technical movie, but a character movie that I really recommend. That's a sort of a more modern one, but yeah, The Informant, if you haven't seen a Soderbergh movie, is just a scream. And yeah, it unlocks Matt Damon. Matt Damon, Psycho.
Yes.
That's the only, and even in Good Will Hunting, damaged, traumatized, psycho, prone to violence, he's never going to be the white hat. True Grit, great movie. Cohen's, that sort of thing.
Coward.
Coward. Yeah. Absolute coward shitbag, right? Like he's the worst. So those Matt Damon performances are the ones I think that just like knock my socks off. They're amazing.
Informant is hilarious, and in a way, it ties neatly together. I would say with Brockovich, because it's kind of like a dark mirror version of that. It's like it's from the other side. You've got corporate malfeasance, but from the inside, and clearly Soderbergh is attracted to those stories. There are other examples,
and I think he makes it. Making it after Brockovich means like, how do I make this patently ridiculous? Like the stuff, it's like, it's so funny that it's true, but it's like this guy thinks that he's like the greatest government insider of all time, but he's just, again, this selfish freak
and delusional. Like, when everybody else gets arrested, I'll be the one to take over the company.
The delusion is so it's intoxicating. It's wonderful.
They'll have no other choice.
I love it. So see how we're chuckling? That's the whole movie. The whole movie is just a scream. Love it.
Yeah,
love it.
It's wild.
Could not agree more.
Yes, but no, I mean, Blake, thank you so much for your time. This is an absolute blast. I would sit here and talk with you in movies and Soderbergh for hours and hours and hours, but we want to keep things brief for you, for all of us. But we just, I don't know. I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. Can you tell us anything? Like you mentioned a little, but remind people, what have you got next? What's on right now? Because I can't recommend what you do enough. I mean, like the deep dives, you also blend it in with the Century Project, and you have great guests, and you talk about contemporary movies, and it's always fun and engaging, and you manage to get it in. Sometimes you have episodes that are like 17 minutes long, and Keir and I are like, how is it so full? It's 17 minutes. It takes us so long. I mean, we were always like, we're gonna keep it concise at like an hour or less for our episodes, was always our things.
We start out by saying like 40 minutes, which 40 minutes.
No.
Well, I think, so thank you very much. Just go to oneheatminute.com. You'll find all of our shows there. Past year shows, finishing off a Sneakers podcast. I've only got 2 episodes of that show to go, which features Phil Alden Robinson, Stephen Tobolowsky from the film, and a whole bunch of really amazing contributors to that. So excited for people to finish that series once it's done. But two answers to your question. How do we do stuff? Sometimes I'm bored. So I'm like Soderbergh, where I go, how do I create a mechanism for me to talk about the things that I want to talk about? And the Decade Project was a way for me to go, how do I keep looking back and seeing what's hanging around? Because that seems like the ceiling of our recent streaming era. It's like the last 10 years is kind of the ceiling. And then some services, unless you're like Criterion Channel or some of the other channels like Tubi, like they kind of have more of a catalog of like older movies. But I'm like, what's the ceiling and what's actually still resonating? So I really like that. But yeah, this year, Ronin or Romin, the Minsider, they're my 2 big shows. But I'm really, really, really proud and stoked that this year, coming over to One Heat Minute Productions, I've got Jason Bailey and Mike Hull, 2 guys who did a very good year in the Fun City Cinema podcast, have got a Guide for the Film Fanatic, which is now a co-production with those guys. So they're producing the show with us. They're going to be out once every 2 weeks on here as well. There's probably going to be some other shows like that, some other things that I'm just producing and not hosting. But yeah, the deep dives are what we're known for. So if you like Michael Mann movies, we've done Heat. We've rigorously gone through Miami Vice, hilariously, Katie Walsh and I, Collateral, Thief, Last of the Mohicans. We just did Minhunter last year, which is a Manhunter series, which just concluded at the end of the year. So there's all that sort of Michael Mann stuff. There's Peter Weir with Podcaster and Commander. There's David Fincher with Zodiac Chronicle. There's Alan Pakula with All the President's Minutes. So we've kind of done those every year, and I've just sort of progressed on basically all of my favorite films and others. And then there's some other shows I've produced with great people like Travis Woods for Increment Vice, and Ethan Warren with Pod Thomas Anderson, and the great Henson Caper. So there's lots of pun-gasmic titles, but they are genuinely great shows. And As another recommendation, Josie and the Podcats, which is my best mate Maria Lewis and I did a documentary series on Josie and the Pussycats, the film and the origins from the comic. She's the host. She did that, but we produced it together. And they're very short and sharp, 20-minute episodes. That's what I'm talking about when I don't know if I can do it. I just did it because I'm like, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, there's lots of great stuff that's coming up. There's actually too much to talk about. So if you subscribe, something there will be your flavor. One Heat Minute Productions, or if you jump onto our Patreon, that's where you get all our decade projects, which is us looking back as they drop, because they drop on our Patreon first, and then at the end of the year, you'll get bombarded with them. But they drop once every couple of weeks on there, and our new shows, the One Hot Takes on new releases, drop on there as well. So that's where you can find all that stuff.
Excellent,
Impressive.
excellent. Yes, like Soderbergh, they're all, full of wit and heart and intelligence, and like also Soderbergh's movies, we just can't get enough of them, and I love listening to them. I subscribe to the Patreon. I enjoy all the things that come through there, and I'm just I'm happy for what's next, and I'm just thrilled we got a chance to talk to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for giving me a chance to talk about Erin Brockovich. I truly adore this movie. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thanks so much, Blake.
Thank you.
What did you think of our interview with Blake Howard? Leave a comment to let us know, or send us an email at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. We want to hear from you.
We'll also hope that you'll check out our Patreon, where you can find all our episodes, audio and video, as well as content that you won't find anywhere else, and it's all in one handy little place. We're at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast.
That's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. You can join our community for absolutely free, just to make sure you don't miss a single new episode or update. Or if you'd like to show your financial support, we'll send you a thank you gift, a Filmographer's logo sticker for $2 per month, or a mug for $5 per month. We're working on more fun merch too.
And hey, if Patreon's not your thing, that's totally fine. You can support us in other ways, like taking a few seconds to leave us a rating or review on whatever podcast you're listening to, giving us a comment on YouTube, giving us a thumbs up, subscribing. All those things help. Your help, as a matter of fact, is crucial to us raising our visibility and helping us find new listeners. You can also find us on Bluesky at The Filmographers, Instagram at, you guessed it, The Filmographers. And we're even on TikTok as well, and having some fun posting some cool little videos there.
And our TikTok handle is One Heat Minute. Just kidding.
So everyone migrate over.
Thank you all for your support, whether it past, present, or future. And thanks, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo and our merch and other graphical needs as they arise. We'll see you all next time.